Homeless at 18, she bought an abandoned workshop for $10. What she found inside didn't just change her life. It rewrote her entire past. If you've ever felt like your story was written for you by someone else, hit that subscribe button, because this is for you. The day I turned 18 was the day I ceased to exist, at least according to the state of New York. For 10 years since my mom died, I was a case file, a number, a line item in a budget. I was Maya, ward of the court. And on my 18th birthday, the court was done with me. They called it aging out. It sounded like a gentle, natural process, like a fruit ripening and falling from a tree. The reality felt more like being pushed off a cliff. My caseworker, a woman named Carol who always smelled faintly of stale coffee and disappointment, handed me a black garbage bag containing the sum of my worldly possessions. 3 changes of clothes, a worn-out paperback, a toothbrush, and a framed photo of my mom, her smile a little faded under the cheap plastic. She also gave me a manila envelope. Inside was my birth certificate, my social security card, and a final check for $250. "This is it, Maya," she said, not meeting my eyes. Her focus was on a spot on the wall just over my shoulder, a place where the institutional beige paint was peeling. "You're an adult now. Good luck." She patted my arm. A gesture so practiced and devoid of warmth it was almost worse than no touch at all. I stood on the cracked concrete steps of the group home, the place I'd lived for the last 4 years. The garbage bag was slung over one shoulder, the manila envelope clutched in my hand like a passport to a country I'd never wanted to visit. The air was cold for September, carrying the first sharp promise of winter. I watched the door swing shut behind me, the click of the lock echoing in the quiet street. For a full minute I didn't move. I just breathed in the air of freedom. It didn't smell sweet. It smelled like exhaust fumes from the passing buses and the damp, decaying leaves piled in the gutters. I had $250, no family, no friends outside the system who weren't in the same sinking boat as me, and a bus station address scribbled on the back of the envelope. That's where I was supposed to go. Get a ticket to the city, find a shelter, get a job. That was the plan. The aging out success story. I felt a familiar cold dread creeping up my spine. The one that whispered I was going to fail, that I'd be another statistic. I was just another piece of institutional driftwood, about to be swept out into a cold, indifferent ocean. But there was something else in the envelope besides the check and the ID. It was a single sheet of crisp, formal letterhead from a law firm, Davies, Finch and Associates. It was a summons of a sort, an invitation. It requested my presence at their downtown office at my earliest convenience to discuss a matter of inheritance. Inheritance. The word was so foreign it felt like it belonged to another language. People like me didn't inherit things. We were lucky if we left the system with a complete set of teeth and no new scars. I looked at the address. It was only 10 blocks away. I looked down the street toward the bus station, the prescribed path to my uncertain future. Then I looked back at the letter. A choice. My first real one as an adult. The bus station could wait. I clutched the strap of the garbage bag, the cheap plastic crinkling under my fingers, and started walking toward the tall, glass buildings downtown. It was a choice made not out of hope, but out of a tiny, stubborn spark of defiance. A refusal to simply follow the last order I'd ever be given. I didn't know it then, but that single decision, that one small step in a different direction, was the beginning of everything. It was the moment my life stopped being a story written by the state and started becoming my own. The walk was longer than I thought. The city blocks stretched out, each one a canyon of steel and glass that made me feel smaller and more insignificant than ever. People in sharp suits with important places to be rushed past me, their eyes sliding over the girl with the garbage bag without a flicker of recognition. I was invisible, a ghost haunting the edges of their busy, successful lives. I found the building, a skyscraper that seemed to pierce the gray clouds. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and polished brass. A security guard with a bored expression looked me up and down, his gaze lingering on the garbage bag. "Delivery entrance is around the back," he grunted. "I have an appointment," I said, my voice sounding thin and reedy in the cavernous space. I held out the letter. He glanced at the name Davies, Finch and Associates, and his expression shifted just a fraction. He pointed a thumb toward a bank of elevators. 34th floor. The elevator ride was silent and smooth, my reflection in the mirrored walls a constant, unwelcome companion. The girl staring back at me looked scared. Her eyes were too wide, her shoulders hunched. I tried to stand up straighter. I took a deep breath. By the time the doors opened onto a hushed, carpeted reception area, I had managed to arrange my face into a mask of neutrality. The receptionist, a woman with perfectly coiffed hair and a headset, gave me the same look as the security guard. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Mr. Davies," I said, sliding the letter across the polished wood of her desk. "I'm Maya." She read the letter, typed something into her computer, and then her eyebrows shot up. "Oh, yes. Mr. Davies is expecting you. Please have a seat." The way she said it, with a sudden, cloying politeness, made me even more nervous. I sat on a leather couch that probably cost more than everything I'd ever owned combined. I placed the garbage bag on the floor beside me, a piece of trash sullying the pristine environment. After a few minutes that felt like hours, a door opened and a man emerged. He was older, maybe in his late 60s, with thinning gray hair and a suit that looked rumpled, as if he'd been living in it for a week. His face was a roadmap of worry lines, but his eyes, behind thick glasses, were kind. "Miss Maya Lane?" he asked, his voice gravelly but gentle. I stood up. "Yes, Arthur Davies. Please, come in." His office wasn't as intimidating as the lobby. It was cluttered. Books were stacked on every surface, and the walls were covered in framed maps of places I'd never heard of. It smelled of old paper and leather. He gestured to a worn armchair opposite his massive oak desk. I sat, perching on the edge. He sat down with a weary sigh and peered at me over his glasses. "I'll be direct, Maya. I was your grandfather's lawyer." The word hung in the air between us. Grandfather. I had a grandfather. The system had told me I had no living relatives. They said my mother was an only child and her parents had passed away long before she did. It was part of the official narrative of my life. I was utterly, completely alone. "I don't have a grandfather," I said, the words coming out flat. "He's dead." Mr. Davies steepled his fingers. "He is now. He passed away 2 months ago. His name was Elias Vance. He was your mother's father." He pushed a thin file across the desk toward me. My name was on the tab. I didn't open it. My mind was reeling. A lie. My entire foundation, the bleak certainty of my aloneness, was a lie. Why did they tell me he was dead? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "It's complicated," Mr. Davies said, and the way he said it told me he wasn't going to elaborate. "Elias and your mother were estranged for a very long time. When she passed, the state made their inquiries. For reasons of his own, Elias did not contest their finding that you had no living family. He allowed you to enter the foster care system." Allowed me. The words landed like a punch. He knew about me. He knew I was alone, a 10-year-old girl who had just lost her mother, and he did nothing. He let me be swallowed by the system. The flicker of hope I'd felt walking here died, replaced by a cold, familiar anger. The anger of abandonment. "So what is this?" I asked, gesturing around the opulent office. Did this man who allowed me to grow up in group homes feel a little guilty on his deathbed? Did he leave me some money to ease his conscience? Mr. Davies looked at me with something like pity, which I hated. "Not exactly. Elias was not a wealthy man. In fact, he died with considerable debt. Most of his assets were seized to cover it. There is only one thing left." He slid another document across the desk. It was a deed. My eyes scanned the legal jargon. It was for a property. A parcel of land in a town I'd never heard of. Northwood, New York. On the property was a single structure, listed as a workshop/garage. "He left you his workshop," Mr. Davies said. "It's all that remains of his estate." I stared at the paper. A workshop? What was I supposed to do with a workshop? I didn't even know how to use a hammer. "There are complications," he continued. his voice taking on a more formal, lawyerly tone. The property has significant back taxes owed on it, roughly $9,000. There is also a lien against it from a development corporation, Titan Holdings. They've been trying to acquire the land for years. The town wants it off the books. Legally, as his sole heir, the property and the debts attached to it fall to you. He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. You have two options. You can refuse the inheritance. In that case, the property will be seized by the county and auctioned off, likely to Titan Holdings, to cover the tax debt. Or you can claim it. He leaned forward. The estate is, for all intents and purposes, insolvent. So we've arranged a legal maneuver. You can purchase the property from the estate before it's seized for a nominal fee. This would transfer the deed and the associated debts directly to you. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a single, crisp $10 bill. $10, he said. That's the price. You give me $10, you sign this paper, and you will own a piece of land with a building on it, along with nearly $10,000 of debt that will come due in 90 days. If you can't pay it, you will lose the property anyway. Most people, he added, his voice gentle again, would walk away. He was offering me a choice between nothing and less than nothing. A choice between being homeless and free and being a property owner drowning in debt. It was absurd. It was insulting. And yet, it was something. It was a tangible link to a past I didn't know I had. A concrete place that belonged to a man who was my blood, even if he was a ghost who had abandoned me. It was a ruin, but it was my ruin. What would you do? I asked him, the question surprising me as much as it did him. He looked taken aback. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Me? I'm a 68-year-old man with a bad back and a comfortable pension. There's no comparison. But Elias was my friend. For a long time, he was a difficult, stubborn man. But he wasn't a bad one. He told me, if this day ever came, to tell you this. Sometimes the things that look like burdens are actually anchors, an anchor. Something to hold you in place. Or something to drown you. I looked at the $10 bill. I thought about the bus station, the shelter, the endless, grinding uncertainty of that life. This was a different kind of uncertainty. It was just as terrifying, but it had a shape. It had an address. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled bills from my final check. I smoothed out a 20. I don't have a 10, I said. Can you make change? A slow smile spread across Arthur Davies's tired face. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen all day. I think we can manage that, he said. He took my 20, handed me back the $10 bill from his desk, and pushed the papers toward me. Sign here, Miss Lane. Welcome to home ownership. I signed my name, my hands surprisingly steady. I was no longer just Maya, the girl aged out of the system. I was Maya Lane, the 18-year-old owner of a debt-ridden workshop in a town I'd never heard of. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't even a happy beginning. But it was a beginning. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like mine. I left the lawyer's office with a $10 bill, a bus ticket to a place called Northwood, and a deed to a disaster. The garbage bag felt heavier now, weighted with the invisible burden of property and debt. Mr. Davies had given me a thick envelope with the deed, a set of keys, and a hand-drawn map of the town. It's about a 5-hour ride north, he'd said. The bus drops you right in the center of town. The workshop is on the outskirts, on a road called Quarry Lane. You can't miss it. The Port Authority bus terminal was a chaotic symphony of human misery. The air was thick with the smell of diesel, hot dogs, and desperation. I found my gate and sat on a hard plastic chair, guarding my garbage bag and the precious envelope. Everyone around me was either running from something or running toward it. I wasn't sure which I was doing. Maybe both. The bus was old, the seats covered in a scratchy, stained fabric. I got a window seat and pressed my forehead against the cool glass as we pulled out of the city, leaving the towering skyline behind. For the first hour, we moved through an endless sprawl of suburbs, strip malls, and highways. It was ugly and familiar. Then, slowly, the landscape began to change. The buildings fell away, replaced by trees. The highways narrowed into 2-lane roads that wound through rolling hills. The farther north we went, the more the colors shifted from the gray of the city to the deep greens and golds of the countryside. It was beautiful in a lonely sort of way. I hadn't seen this much open space since I was a little girl, on a trip to the beach with my mom. The memory surfaced so suddenly it was like a physical blow. Her laughing, the sun on her face, the smell of salt in the air. I pushed it down. Thinking about her hurt too much, especially now with this new, confusing betrayal from a grandfather I never knew. What kind of man lets his own grandchild vanish into the system? What kind of father becomes so estranged from his daughter that he doesn't even claim her body, leaving it to the state? The questions circled in my mind, a relentless, angry buzz. The bus made stops in a series of small towns that all looked the same. A single main street with a post office, a diner, and a handful of shuttered storefronts. With each stop, the bus emptied out a little more, until it was just me and a handful of other quiet, solitary travelers. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. We were deep in the mountains now, the road twisting through dark forests of pine and birch. Felt like I was traveling to the edge of the world. By the time the bus pulled into Northwood, it was full dark. The driver called out the name of the town, his voice echoing in the nearly empty bus. "This is you, kid." I grabbed my things and stepped out onto a quiet, empty street. The air was shockingly cold and clean, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. The bus hissed and pulled away, its red taillights disappearing around a bend, leaving me in an almost perfect silence. Northwood wasn't just a small town. It was a forgotten one. The main street was lit by a few old-fashioned streetlights that cast long, lonely pools of yellow light. Most of the shops were dark. A single neon sign glowed in the distance. "Eat." I looked at the map Mr. Davies had drawn. It was simple enough. Main Street, a left on Mill Road, and then about a mile down Quarry Lane. It looked like a 20-minute walk. I adjusted the garbage bag on my shoulder and started walking. The only sound was the crunch of my own footsteps on the pavement. I felt a profound sense of isolation, a feeling that I was the only person awake in the entire town. It was a scary feeling, but there was a strange peace to it, too. For the first time, I wasn't surrounded by the constant noise and presence of other people. Caseworkers, other kids, supervisors. The silence was mine. Mill Road was unpaved, and the farther I walked, the more the town disappeared behind me. The road became a dirt track flanked by dense, dark woods. The moon was bright, illuminating the path ahead. I could hear the sound of a river somewhere nearby, a low, constant rush. I wasn't scared of the dark or the woods. I'd learned in the system that the real monsters were people. The woods were just woods. Quarry Lane was even more remote, little more than a gravel path branching off Mill Road. It was rutted and overgrown. And then I saw it. Set back from the road, at the end of the lane was a large, dark shape. A building. It was a long, low structure made of cinder blocks and corrugated metal, with a wide garage door across the front. It looked less like a workshop and more like a bunker. There were no lights on. The windows were dark, gaping holes. A large, dead tree stood beside it, its bare branches like skeletal fingers scratching at the sky. This was it. My inheritance. My anchor. It looked like it could drown me without even trying. I walked up the overgrown driveway. The air grew colder as I got closer to the building. I fumbled in the envelope for the keys. There were two of them on a simple metal ring. One was a small, normal-looking house key. The other was large and industrial, the kind used for heavy-duty locks. A thick chain and a massive, rusted padlock secured the main garage door. I tried the big key, slid in, but the lock was frozen with rust. I put all my weight into it, grunting with the effort, my fingers numb from the cold. It wouldn't budge. I walked around the side of the building, my feet sinking into the damp, overgrown grass. There was a smaller side door, a regular metal door with a standard lock. I tried the smaller key, turned. With a loud, groaning screech of rusted hinges, the door swung inward, opening into a pitch-black space. A wave of cold, musty air washed over me, a smell of dust, oil, and decay. It was the smell of a place that had been sealed for a very long time. I hesitated at the threshold, my heart pounding. This was the moment of truth. I was standing on the doorstep of my past, a past I never knew existed. I took out my phone, the screen casting a pale, ghostly light. The battery was at 15%. I turned on the flashlight function and pointed it inside. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a vast, cavernous space. It was packed with machinery. Huge, silent metal beasts covered in thick blankets of dust and cobwebs. There were lathes, drill presses, bandsaws, and other things I couldn't identify. Workbenches lined the walls, cluttered with tools, metal shavings, and half-finished projects. It was the lair of a man who built things. A man who had abandoned me. Stepping inside felt like entering a tomb. I took a slow, cautious step over the threshold, and then another. The door swung shut behind me with a final, booming clang, sealing me inside. I was alone, in the dark, in my grandfather's workshop. The silence inside was different from the silence outside. It was heavier, pressed down by the weight of years. My phone's flashlight beam felt small and inadequate, a tiny spear of light in an ocean of darkness. I swept the beam across the space. Dust motes danced in the light like tiny ghosts. Everything was coated in a thick, gray layer of it. It was clear that no one had been in here for a long, long time. Longer than the 2 months since my grandfather had died. Felt like it had been sealed for years. I made my way carefully between the hulking machines. My footsteps were muffled by the dust on the concrete floor. I ran my fingers over a workbench. The tools were arranged with a strange precision, even under the dust. Wrenches and calipers lay in neat rows, as if their owner had just set them down and intended to come right back. In the center of the workshop was a massive steel table, the kind used for welding. On it sat a single object, draped with a heavy canvas cloth. It was the only thing in the room that seemed deliberately covered. Curiosity overriding my fear, I walked over to it. I grabbed a corner of the canvas. It was heavy and stiff with age. I pulled. The cloth came away with a shower of dust, revealing what was underneath. It was a motorcycle, but it wasn't a finished one. It was a skeleton, a frame with an engine mounted in it, the wheels attached but nothing else. Wires dangled from the handlebars. It was a project frozen in time. A ghost of a machine. Why leave it like this? Why cover it so carefully? I continued my exploration, moving toward the back of the workshop. Against the far wall there was a small, closed door. I pushed it open. It led to a tiny, Spartan room. There was a narrow cot with a thin, stained mattress, a small wooden desk, and a single chair. A hot plate and an empty kettle sat on a crate. This was where he lived, or at least where he slept when he was working here. It was the room of a monk or a prisoner. On the desk, there was a single, empty coffee mug and an ashtray overflowing with cigarette butts. Nothing else. No pictures, no books, no personal effects. It was a room that was determined to tell no stories. I felt a fresh wave of anger. This was the man who had let me go. This was the life he chose over me. A life of solitude and metal and dust. I went back into the main workshop, my frustration growing. What was I even looking for? A clue? An explanation? An apology? The place was as silent and uncommunicative as the man himself. My phone buzzed. A low battery warning. 10%. Panic flared in my chest. I couldn't be left in here in total darkness. I had to find a light switch. I ran my hands along the wall by the door, feeling for a switch plate. My fingers brushed against the cold cinder blocks, cobwebs breaking against my skin. Finally, I found it. A simple, old-fashioned flip switch. I held my breath and flipped it up. Nothing. I flipped it down and up again. Still nothing. Of course. The power had probably been shut off years ago. I swept my phone light around the room again. Desperately. My eyes fell on something in the corner. A large metal cabinet with a heavy latch. It looked like a storage locker. Maybe there were candles or a lantern. I hurried over and pulled on the latch. It was stuck fast. I braced my foot against the wall and pulled with both hands. With a rusty shriek, The latch gave way and the cabinet doors swung open. The shelves were filled with cans of oil, solvents, and cleaning supplies. But on the top shelf, tucked behind a row of paint cans, was a small metal box. A cash box. It had a simple lock on it. It was locked. Disappointment hit me hard. I was about to give up when my eyes caught something else on the shelf. A single, small, brass key, hanging from a nail on the inside of the cabinet door. It was tiny, almost hidden in the shadows. My heart started pounding again. I took the key. It looked like the right size. I picked up the box. It was surprisingly heavy. I carried it over to the welding table and set it down next to the motorcycle skeleton. I slid the small brass key into the lock. Turned. I lifted the lid. For a moment, I couldn't process what I was seeing. The box was full of money. Stacks of cash, neatly bundled in paper bands. Mostly 20s and 50s. I lifted one of the bundles. The paper band was old and brittle. I riffled through the bills. They were real. I started pulling the stacks out, my hands shaking. There was more underneath. And more. It must have been thousands of dollars. Tens of thousands. Tucked in the very bottom of the box, beneath the last stack of cash, was a thick, sealed envelope. My name was written on the front in a strong, slightly slanted handwriting. Maya. Just my name. My phone screen went black. The battery was dead. I was plunged into absolute, terrifying darkness. The only thing I could feel was the rough paper of the envelope in my hand and the cool, smooth edges of the stacks of money on the table beside me. The darkness was total. A thick, suffocating black that pressed in on me from all sides. For a few seconds I couldn't breathe. The silence of the workshop, which had been heavy before, now felt absolute. It roared in my ears. I stood frozen, my hand clutching the envelope, my other hand resting on a stack of cold cash. My mind was a chaotic jumble of shock, fear, and a wild, surging hope that felt just as dangerous as the despair. Money. There was money. Enough to pay the taxes? Enough to fix this place? Enough to what? I fumbled in my garbage bag, my fingers searching for the one thing I knew was there. My lighter. I always carried one. A stupid habit I'd picked up, even though I didn't smoke. A little piece of fire, a little bit of control. My fingers closed around the familiar plastic shape. I flicked it. The first spark failed. The second, too. On the third try, a tiny, brave flame bloomed in the darkness, casting a flickering, dancing light. In the small circle of orange glow, the workshop looked even more menacing. The machines became huge, shadowy beasts, their forms distorted by the unsteady light. The motorcycle skeleton looked like the bones of some prehistoric animal. I held the lighter close to the envelope. My name, Maya, written by a hand I'd never held. A man who was a complete mystery to me. A man who had let me go, but had left me this. A box of money and a letter. I had to know what it said. I couldn't wait for daylight. I sat down on the dusty concrete floor, my back against the leg of the welding table. I held the lighter in one hand and the envelope in the other. My thumb burned from holding down the gas button, but I didn't care. I carefully tore open the seal. Inside was not one sheet, but many. A thick stack of pages, filled with the same strong handwriting. I took a deep breath, the cold, dusty air filling my lungs, and began to read. My dearest Maya, it began. The words felt like a physical impact. No one had ever called me that. Dearest. If you are reading this, then it means I am gone. It means Arthur Davies did as I asked, and you have found your way here. I hope you did not hate him for it. He is a good man and my only friend. I am your grandfather, Elias Vance, and I owe you the truth. All of it. The flame flickered, and I had to shield it with my hand. I know what you must think of me. You think I abandoned you. You think I abandoned your mother. You are right. I did. But I need you to know why. It is not an excuse. There are no excuses for what you have endured. But it is a reason. And you deserve to know the reason. Your mother, Eleanor, was the light of my life. She was bright and wild and beautiful. But when she was a teenager, she fell in with a bad crowd. Not just kids doing stupid things. These were dangerous people. A man, older than her, named Marcus Thorne. He was charming, and he promised her the world. I saw him for what he was, a predator, a criminal involved in things I still don't fully understand. Money laundering, extortion. He had your mother wrapped around his finger. I tried to warn her, to pull her away, but she was in love. The more I fought him, the more she clung to him. It ended the way it always does. She saw something she wasn't supposed to see. A ledger, a transaction. Something that could put him and his associates away for a very long time. She came to me terrified. She told me everything. We were going to go to the police. But Thorne found out. He came to our home. He wasn't charming anymore. He told me he would kill her. He would kill us both. But he offered me a deal. He would let Eleanor walk away, disappear, start a new life. On one condition. I had to take the fall for a crime I didn't commit. An embezzlement charge from a company he had bled dry. It would mean prison. 5 years. I had to stop reading. My hand was shaking so badly the flame was dancing wildly. I let go of the lighter, plunging myself back into darkness for a moment to steady myself. Prison. He went to prison. For her. I flicked the lighter back on and continued reading. It was no choice at all. I would have done anything to save her. I took the deal. I signed a confession. I never saw her again. The condition was that she would sever all ties with me. If she ever tried to contact me, the deal was off. Thorne's people would find her. So she ran. She changed her name from Eleanor Vance to Ellen Lane. And I went to prison. When I got out, I tried to find her. But she was gone. Vanished. I respected her reasons. I had to believe she was safe, that she had built a new life. I came here to Northwood, a place I remembered from my youth. I bought this workshop. I wanted to disappear, too. I worked. I kept my head down. It was a quiet, empty life. Then, 10 years ago, Arthur Davies found me. He was the court-appointed lawyer for my case, the one who saw me railroaded. He always felt guilty about it. He had spent years trying to track Eleanor down to make amends. He found her, but it was too late. He found her death certificate. And he found you. He told me she had a daughter. My granddaughter. My first instinct was to run to you, to hold you and tell you I was there. But I couldn't. Don't you see? Thorne was still out there. He was more powerful than ever. If he ever found out that Eleanor had a child, that a piece of her still existed, he would see you as a loose end, a threat, the child of the woman who knew his secrets. As long as I was alive, a connection to you, you were in danger. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I told Arthur to let the state take you. I told him to let them believe I was dead or gone. I became a ghost. I knew the system was a cruel place. I knew you would suffer. And every single day for the last 10 years, that knowledge has been a knife in my heart. But I believed you would be safer there. Lost in the files. Safer than you would be as Elias Vance's granddaughter. It was a monstrous choice. A gamble. And I can only pray it was the right 1 inch. I was crying now. Silent tears tracking paths through the dust on my cheeks. The anger I had felt was dissolving, replaced by a grief so profound it was a physical ache in my chest. He hadn't abandoned me. He had hidden me. He had sacrificed his freedom for my mother, and his heart for me. The story wasn't one of abandonment. It was a story of protection. A brutal, painful, flawed kind of love. The lighter was getting hot. I switched hands and kept reading, my vision blurry. I spent the last 10 years doing 2 things. Watching from a distance and preparing. Arthur kept me informed. He sent me your school photos. I have them all. You have your mother's eyes. And I worked. I took on any cash job I could get. Welding, fabrication, engine repair. Every dollar I made, I saved. I put it in that box. For you. It was my penance. And it was your arsenal. The second thing I did was gather information. Thorne built his empire, founding a company called Titan Holdings. A legitimate front for his dirty money. And for years, he's been trying to buy up this whole valley. This land, this workshop, is one of the last holdouts. He doesn't know I'm here. He doesn't know this land belonged to the man he sent to prison. To him, it's just another piece on a map. But I know it's more than that. In this box, with the money and this letter, you will find another envelope. Inside is everything I have. Evidence. Copies of the old ledgers I managed to get from Arthur's files. Testimony from another man he squeezed out. Enough, I hope, to expose him, to finally bring him down. So now you have a choice. The money in the box is about $95,000. It's enough to pay the back taxes on this place 9 times over. Or it's enough for you to disappear. You can take it, walk away from this workshop in this town, and start a new life somewhere far away. No one would blame you. God knows you've earned it. That is the easy path. And you deserve an easy path. Or you can stay. You can pay the taxes. You can claim this place. This piece of land your mother's father bled for. You can take the evidence to the authorities. You can fight. It will be hard. They will come for you. Titan Holdings will try to crush you. But this workshop is solid. The walls are thick. I built it to last. And you, Maya, you are my granddaughter. You are made of the same strong stuff as your mother. You are a survivor. The motorcycle in the center of the shop. It was for you. I was building it for your 18th birthday. A fantasy. A dream that maybe, somehow, we could ride away together. I never got to finish it. Maybe you will. Whatever you choose, know this. I have loved you every single day of your life. Even from a distance. Even in silence. You were never abandoned. You were protected. Forgive me for the pain my protection caused. Live a good life, Maya. Be happy. That is all I ever wanted for your mother. And it's all I want for you. Your grandfather, Elias, the lighter, sputtered and died. The darkness that returned was no longer terrifying. It was soft. It was quiet. It was filled with the ghost of a man I finally understood. I sat there on the cold floor for what felt like an eternity, the letter clutched to my chest. I cried. I cried for the 10-year-old girl who thought she was all alone. I cried for my mother, who I now understood was brave, not just a victim. And I cried for my grandfather, a man who had lived a life of lonely penance to keep us safe. He had given me more than a workshop and a box of money. He had given me back my past. He had given me a story I could be proud of. And he had given me a choice. Disappear with the money or stay and fight. It was the choice between being a ghost like he had been or being real, being seen. It was the choice between safety and justice. I looked around the dark workshop, at the hulking shapes of the machines, at the skeleton of the motorcycle. This wasn't just a building. It was a legacy. It was a fortress. It was the last piece of a man who had loved me enough to let me go. How could I walk away from that? How could I let his sacrifice be for nothing? How could I let a man like Marcus Thorne win? The answer was clear. It wasn't even a choice, not really. It was a calling. I fell asleep on the floor, curled up against the cold metal leg of the welding table, the letter my pillow. When I woke up, pale morning light was filtering through the grimy windows, cutting hazy shafts through the dusty air. The workshop was no longer a tomb. It was a kingdom, my kingdom. I stood up, my body stiff and sore. I found the second envelope my grandfather had mentioned, tucked at the very bottom of the cash box. It was thick and heavy. I didn't open it. Not yet. That was a weapon for a later battle. My first priority was to secure my ground. I found a heavy-duty flashlight in the cabinet where the cash box had been, its beam strong and steady. Then I began a more thorough search. In the small office, tucked under the cot, I found a box of his old clothes. They were worn and smelled of oil and him, but they were clean. I found a stash of canned food, bottled water, and a camping stove with a full fuel canister. He had prepared for this. He had made sure I would have what I needed to survive the first few days. It was another small, painful act of love. My first move was to get the main garage door open. The massive padlock was still rusted shut. I looked at the array of tools on the workbenches. I found a can of penetrating oil and a heavy bolt cutter. It took me almost an hour, my muscles screaming in protest, but finally, with a loud snap, the chain fell away. I heaved the huge corrugated door upward. It groaned and shuddered, but it rose, flooding the workshop with daylight and fresh, cold air. The world outside looked different now. The dead tree didn't look menacing. It just looked like it needed to be cut down for firewood. The overgrown driveway didn't look neglected. It looked like a project. For the first time since arriving, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't fear or grief. It was determination. I spent the rest of the day taking stock. I organized his tools. I swept a small section of the floor, creating an island of clean concrete in the sea of dust. I made myself coffee on the camping stove in his old mug. It was the best coffee I'd ever tasted. Late in the afternoon, a sleek black car I didn't recognize rolled slowly down Quarry Lane. It stopped at the end of my driveway. A man in a suit got out. He was polished and expensive-looking, a stark contrast to the rustic setting. He looked at the open garage door, at me standing in the entrance, and a flicker of surprise crossed his face. He'd been expecting an abandoned property, not an occupant. "Can I help you?" I called out, my voice stronger than I expected. He walked toward me, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel. He had a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You must be Miss Lane," he said. "My name is Jonathan Pike. I'm a legal representative for Titan Holdings." My blood ran cold. Titan Holdings. Thorne's company. The fight was coming to me sooner than I'd expected. "I understand you've recently taken possession of this property," he said, his eyes scanning the workshop's interior with a dismissive air. "Frankly, it's a bit of a mess. And there's the matter of the outstanding tax liability. I'm aware of the situation," I said, keeping my voice level. "Good. Then you'll understand that our offer is a generous one. Titan is prepared to offer you $20,000 for this parcel. We'll absorb all the back taxes and legal fees. You walk away free and clear, with a nice little nest egg to start your life. $20,000. It sounded like so much money a day ago. Now, knowing what was in the box, it was an insult. He was trying to cheat me. He was trying to steal my grandfather's legacy for pennies on the dollar. This is what it feels like, doesn't it? When the world tries to tell you what you're worth. When it puts a price tag on your history, on your future, and expects you to take the deal. I wonder how many of you watching have been given an offer like that. A choice that feels like a trap. Let me know in the comments. I read every single one, because these stories, these moments of being underestimated, they're what connect us. "No, thank you," I said. Pike's smile faltered. "I don't think you understand, Miss Lane. This isn't a negotiation. That property will be seized in less than 90 days. Our offer is the only way you'll see a dime from it. $20,000 is a gift." "No," I said again, more firmly this time. "The property is not for sale." His eyes hardened. The mask of civility slipped, revealing the predator underneath. "You're making a mistake, little girl. You have no idea what you're up against. And you have no idea who you're talking to," I said, and the words felt truer than anything I'd ever spoken. I was Elias Vance's granddaughter. I was standing on his ground. He turned without another word, got back in his car, and sped away, leaving a cloud of dust behind. The first shot had been fired. I stood there for a long time watching the dust settle. I wasn't scared. I was energized. He had called me little girl. He had underestimated me. That was my grandfather's final gift. The power of being underestimated. The next morning, I walked into town. It was a long walk, but I didn't mind. The air was crisp, and the sun was bright. The town looked different in the daylight. It was still quiet and a little worn down, but it had a certain charm. I saw people tending their gardens, a mailman making his rounds. It was a real place with real lives happening. My first stop was the bank. It was a small, local institution with a single teller behind a brass grill. I walked in, carrying a backpack that felt dangerously heavy. I asked to speak to the manager. A kind-faced woman named Mrs. Gable led me into her office. I opened my backpack on her desk and took out $9,100 in cash. "I need to make a deposit," I said. "And then I need a certified check made out to the Northwood County Tax Assessor's office." Mrs. Gable looked at the pile of cash, then at me, a young woman in worn clothes with dust on her jeans. She didn't ask any questions. She didn't look suspicious or judgmental. She just nodded. "Of course," she said. "Let's get that taken care of for you." An hour later, I walked into the county clerk's office in the town hall and handed over the check. The clerk, a man who looked like he'd been sitting in that same chair for 50 years, stamped my paperwork with a loud, satisfying thud. "All paid up," he grunted. "Property's yours. Free and clear, free and clear." The words were magical. I walked out of the town hall and stood on the steps, blinking in the sunlight. I had done it. I had secured my fortress. The land was mine. My grandfather's sacrifice was honored. This was step one. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. But for the first time, I felt like I was on solid ground. I had money in the bank, a roof over my head, even if it was a dusty one, and a purpose. I still had the other envelope, the weapon. I wasn't ready to use it yet. First, I had to build my life. I had to make this place a home. On my way back, I stopped at the diner with the eat sign. I sat at the counter and ordered a real breakfast. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, the works. The waitress, a woman with a friendly smile and a tired face, kept my coffee cup full. "You're new in town," she said. More a statement than a question. "I'm staying out on Quarry Lane," I said. At the old Vance workshop, her smile faded a little. "Elias's place. We were all so sorry to hear he passed. He was a quiet man, but a good one. Kept to himself." "Are you family?" "I'm his granddaughter," I said. The words felt good. They felt solid. Real. A wave of murmurs went through the few other patrons at the counter. A man in a flannel shirt turned to me. "Elias Vance was your grandfather?" He fixed my tractor once. Wouldn't take more than $20 for a whole day's work. He was a stand-up guy. I spent the next few weeks working. I worked harder than I ever had in my life. I cleaned the workshop from top to bottom. I scrubbed away years of dust and grime. I organized the tools, learned what they were for from old manuals I found on a shelf. I cut down the dead tree and chopped it into firewood. I bought groceries in town. I started talking to people. The hardware store owner showed me how to patch the leaky roof. The waitress from the diner brought me a casserole one evening. "Just so you have a real meal," she said. I was slowly, cautiously, becoming a part of the town. They were wary, but they were kind. They had respected my grandfather, and for his sake, they were giving me a chance. One day, I decided it was time. I pulled the canvas off the motorcycle. I looked at the unfinished frame, the dangling wires. My grandfather had wanted to build this for me. Finishing it felt like finishing a conversation we never got to have. I found his plans, detailed drawings and notes, tucked away in a cabinet. I knew nothing about mechanics, but he had left me a roadmap. I started with the basics, cleaning each part, reading the manuals. It was slow, frustrating work. I made mistakes. I spent hours trying to figure out one small connection. But every time I attached a new piece, every time a part clicked into place, I felt a connection to him. I felt his patience, his precision. I wasn't just building a machine. I was rebuilding my own history. I was taking the broken pieces of my past and putting them together into something new, something that could move forward. During this time, Titan Holdings didn't stay quiet. I got letters from their lawyers, formal and threatening, questioning the legitimacy of my ownership. Surveyors showed up at my property line, trying to find loopholes in the old deeds. A building inspector came by, citing me for a dozen minor code violations. It was a campaign of harassment, designed to wear me down, to make me feel small and powerless. But it had the opposite effect. Every threat, every official-looking letter, just strengthened my resolve. They didn't know I had the cash box. They didn't know about the second envelope. They didn't know I wasn't just some scared kid. I was a fortress. I was my grandfather's legacy. Weeks turned into a month, then two. The autumn chill gave way to the deep cold of winter. I learned how to light the old wood-burning stove in the corner of the workshop, and its warmth pushed back the biting cold. The workshop became less of a cavern and more of a home. I had a bed, a clean space, a project. I had a purpose. The motorcycle was starting to look like a real machine. I had the engine block cleaned and mounted, the wiring harness painstakingly installed, the fuel tank polished and attached. It was beautiful. Finally, the day came when I felt ready. The bike was almost done. My home was secure. My resolve was solid. It was time to stop defending and start attacking. I took a bus back to the city. I wore a clean pair of jeans and one of my grandfather's old flannel shirts. I walked into the marble lobby of Davies, Finch and Associates, but this time I didn't feel small or invisible. I walked with a purpose. Mr. Davies looked different. When he saw me, the weary lines on his face seemed to soften. He looked proud. "Maya," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm. "You look well." "I am," I said. We sat in his cluttered office, and I told him everything. About the money, the letter, the harassment from Titan. I told him about the town, the people, the workshop. I told him about the motorcycle. When I was done, I placed the second envelope, my grandfather's weapon, on his desk. "He said this was everything," I said. "Evidence." "He wanted me to take it to the authorities." Mr. Davies picked up the envelope and held it, weighing it in his hands. "Elias was a meticulous man," he said softly. "If he said this was the evidence, then it's the evidence." He looked at me, his eyes serious. "Are you sure you want to do this, Maya? Once you fire this shot, there's no going back. Marcus Thorne is a dangerous man. He will fight back and it will get ugly." I thought of the group home. I thought of my mother. I thought of my grandfather, alone in his workshop for all those years. "I'm not the one who needs to be scared anymore," I said. The legal battle was long and messy. Mr. Davies took the evidence to the state attorney general. The ledgers, the testimony. It was a bombshell. It blew a hole in Titan Holdings' legitimate facade. Thorne's lawyers fought back with everything they had. They tried to discredit me, to discredit my grandfather. They painted him as a bitter ex-convict with a grudge, and me as a greedy, opportunistic kid. There were newspaper articles. There were more threats. But I wasn't alone anymore. Mr. Davies was my shield in the legal world. And back in Northwood, the town became my shield in the real world. The story had gotten out. They knew who I was, and they knew who Titan was. When a news crew showed up at my workshop, the owner of the hardware store and the waitress from the diner stood with me, telling the cameras what they knew of Elias Vance's character, and how Titan had been trying to bully the whole valley for years. They weren't just my neighbors anymore. They were my community. The fight took almost a year. But in the end, truth is a stubborn thing. Thorne's empire began to crumble under the weight of federal investigations. His assets were frozen. He was arrested. It wasn't a dramatic courtroom victory like in the movies. It was a slow, grinding process, but it was a victory nonetheless. The day the news broke that Marcus Thorne had been indicted, I was in the workshop. I had finally finished the motorcycle. It was gleaming, a beautiful machine of black and chrome. I had learned to ride it on the back roads around Northwood, the engine a powerful, steady heartbeat beneath me. I wheeled it out into the sunlight. I had a full tank of gas and a map in my pocket. I didn't know where I was going. It didn't matter. For the first time in my life, I was free. Not just from the system, but from the past. My grandfather's ghost was at peace. My mother's memory was honored. And I had a future that was entirely my own. The workshop wasn't a burden or a debt anymore. It was home. The people in Northwood weren't strangers. They were family. And the name Maya Lane wasn't a case file number. It was the name of a woman who had been given a ruin and had built a life. I started the engine. It roared to life, a powerful, defiant sound in the quiet country air. Before I rode away, I thought about the journey, about that first step away from the bus station, the choice that had unraveled everything. Sometimes the biggest changes in our lives come from the smallest acts of defiance. From refusing the story you've been handed and demanding to write your own. My grandfather called his workshop an anchor. He was right. It didn't drown me. It held me steady in the storm, long enough for me to learn how to sail. It's funny how things turn out. The place that looked like an ending was really just the beginning. The inheritance that looked like a debt was actually a gift. And the truth that hurt the most was the one that ultimately set me free. Home isn't always a place you're given. Sometimes it's a place you have to build. Sometimes you have to sweep away the dust of other people's stories to find the foundation of your own. You have to face the darkness to find the light. And you have to be willing to fight for the ground beneath your feet. That's what this story taught me. And maybe it's a lesson you needed to hear, too. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. This channel is for people like us, people who have had to fight for their stories. If that's you, please subscribe and become part of this community. And I want you to do one more thing. In the comments below, tell me about a time you were underestimated. A time someone wrote you off, but you proved them wrong. I'll be reading them because your stories matter. You matter. Now I have a road to follow. And for the first time, I get to choose the destination.